great. I literally just walked in from the broker class and Brenda and I had a quick powwow outside and so I don't even know what our format's going to be today. Do you want to start with the things that are on your mind or just wrap back and forth?
I'd like to start with a quick summary and then we'll go real in detail, because after I attended the class, actually Tuesday after class that we had here, I talked to Chris in the hall for a little bit and I said, I've been thinking during this class, I stood there and thought, I'm not chasing this commission. I'm not waiting for that buyer's agent or that listing agent to call me back and tell me how much they're paying. In the meantime, my buyer's missing out on this house because some of them aren't great about returning calls, right? If I want it, I'm asking for it. And that if that buyer wants my commission paid, I am asking for it in my offer. I don't care if the seller said they're offering it or not, because I know the exclusive right to sell doesn't have an amount in it for the buyer's agent commission anyway, right? So, and I thought on my listings.
And even if they've agreed to it verbally, it's still not binding.
Right. It's not written anywhere. It's not signed off on. So on my listings, do I really need that extra step of advertising it? No. Do I need to put it somewhere? No. If somebody calls me and says, is your seller paying buyer agent commission, or how much buyer agent commission will your seller pay? I'm saying, write it up. Write up what your buyer wants on your offer and I will present it to my seller, because there's more than one term in that contract, right? There's a lot of terms that go into it. So if I said no, could I be leaving money on the table for my seller? No, they're not paying buyer agent commission. Well, how did we know what their dollar amount offer was going to be? Right? Does that make sense? Does that make it so simple now?
And actually, I've kind of rethought the whole website thing that we were talking about, and so is Brenda. Our fiduciary, when we sign an exclusive right to sell, who's our fiduciary duty to? Sell, right? And so by us running around the country telling everybody that they'll do 3%, 3%, 3%, but a buyer was willing to only ask for 2%, what have we done?
I was going to tell you that on Tuesday, but I didn't want to call you out.
Right. Well, it's just these are things. I thought the best thing I heard in class today was treat seller's compensation just like a carpet allowance. Have you ever seen like a $3,000 carpet allowance written in the form? Well, you can't write the compensation in the thing, but have you ever seen a $3,000, carpet allowance?
Yep.
Is it binding?
No.
If you don't put it in the contract, you don't just magically get $3,000.
Right. Even if it's in the MLS remarks, you have to write it in. If you want it, write it in the offer. If you want it paid, do you know before you write your offer if the seller will pay closing cost, or do you just ask for it when your buyer needs it? You just ask for it. Same thing here.
Okay.
Just write it in. Now you do have to do the math. You can't put 3% on the line. You actually have to do the math, which I'll bring you back to things you'll have to keep in mind and think a little bigger on. If that price reduces after inspection or appraisal, are you still covered in your buyer agency? You can't get more than your buyer agency says. So if your buyer agency says 3% of purchase price, my original contract is $300,000. So I've got $9,000 wrote in on the line for my buyer agent commission the seller's paying. Then I reduce the price to $290 because it didn't appraise. Now I'm getting paid still $9,000 because that doesn't change. That was a set flat amount the seller was paying. But my buyer agency still says 3% of purchase price is the max I can get.
And Jessica,
I got to kind of watch that.
And Jessica, who's on the forms committee and a pretty sharp broker herself, she was very clear. Like, you can go back, you can say, okay, we agreed to 3%, but now they're offering 4%, so we want to redo this 4%, right? She was like, you can do that. She goes, but you're going to need to have documentation that you had a conversation that said, hey, I need you to pay this much money so that I can make more money. So even from a buyer's agency fiduciary duty, what you're really saying, the buyer needs to fully understand and check off when you're raising your amount on an amendment, that they understood that they're now paying more for the house for your benefit.
And yeah, when she talked in the class I attended, she was like, tell them, we can ask for it in closing cost and try to reallocate it somewhere because we work for that buyer, right? I already told them I would do it for 3%. Now I'm telling them I want to do it for 4%.
Yeah.
Buyer's probably going to want you to try to get that 1% to them, which you can try.
Which, by the way, just I'm not whatever, But over the years, I've been offered a lot of bonuses and I've always just looked at the person and said, this is your money. And then we took it off the sale price, right? So it's the way I've already done business, so I'm comfortable with that. But for some of you who have taken the bonuses, which there's no right or wrong, that's the way it was done. But you better have a strong reason for upping the amendment.
Right.
Can you explain that again? Because I heard it, but I need to hear it again.
Yeah,
Thank you for your transparency, Brenda.
Yes, it does. Okay, what part do you want me to talk about? The extra paying more or you reduced your price? Where do you want to go into?
So let's say it's let's say it's $100,000 house.
Okay.
And you agreed that you were going to get paid 3% for the buyer. And that would be $3,000, right? Okay. But the seller was offering 4%, you found out after the contract. So you want that extra $1,000, right? Because the seller was willing to go to 96,000, not 97,000. You follow me? So I need to go to the buyer now, and I need to say to the buyer, hey, we probably could have got that thing for 99,000. But since we didn't, I want to go ahead and get paid an extra $1,000 since I didn't do a very good job of negotiating for you. Could I have that $1,000? If that's good with you, please sign this. What's that conversation going to be like?
But it's already wrote offer too,
Yeah.
the amount.
So, yeah, so the amount. So the only person that makes out on that deal is the agent. How's your buyer going to feel about that?
Or if they're offering more, they want the buyer agreed in the buyer agency. It probably needs to go back to the buyer as negotiated sales price.
You can try to negotiate that in for the buyer.
But we won't.
On an amendment?
We may not know, but if you found out.
Offer wherever you want, depends on what stage you're at. At an amendment, you might be too late. Seller can say no, right? The seller's like, ooh, I'm just gonna miss $1,000. It's how the seller's like.
Buyer that you didn't negotiate very well.
No, you wouldn't.
I wouldn't do that. Why I said that's like saying to your buyer, I get.
Right.
That's how it would be perceived.
No, it would not go over very well.
So how am I gonna find it since commissions are not posted? How would I find out later that the seller's offering more than what I?
Maybe John put it on a website somewhere that said they're paying 4% for his listing.
Not all agents are having these classes.
You can also put it
Right.
on a flyer inside the house.
Yes.
Also make a sign writer.
Yeah, you can advertise it anywhere except that it's connected to MLS, basically.
But what you tell one, you tell all.
Oh, housing violations, fair housing violations?
They'll get
Just
you on it.
waiting for you.
Yeah, if they said if you do tell a percentage, you make sure everybody going in and showing that house knows that percentage. And it better be the same number to everybody.
Yeah, so don't change it.
Yeah, so that was another reason not to give an amount, was because you can get hung up on that if someone didn't know and someone else did know. And so it's better to say, write it up and submit it. I'll present it to my seller.
On Tuesday, did you get the same feeling I got? Because we haven't really had time to really discuss this. I got the feeling today that we're at or ahead of most places
Yes.
with these conversations. So I want to congratulate you on being here again on Zoom, whatever. We're having conversations that some of the brokers, they're still on the first stage of grief, denial. And so you guys are all at least participating in this conversation. So good job. Hey, Alex, come on in.
But back to, if you reduce the price in your contract, the amount you ask for buyer agent commission does not change with a price reduction because it is a set dollar amount. It's not a percentage in your contract, right? So if you reduce the price in your contract later for appraisal or inspection or whatever reason you're reducing it for, make sure you're still compliant with your buyer agency agreement and you are not now accepting more than your buyer agency agreement says you can have.
So if the price reduces on the house and I'm the buyer's agent, I need to go to my buyer and amend that agreement to make my compensation lower.
Right, and you could even put,
That's if it's what now?
you would amend the contract if you're going lower. If you want to go up and take that higher amount that you originally agreed to in the contract, then you're amending your buyer agency. And you could just amend it to, this says I'm getting paid $9,000. And you can put the flat dollar amount in it at that point if you wanted.
Cause I can see that if it were a flat amount, but if my buyer's agreement says it's a percentage, then I don't have to change it because it's whatever percentage, right?
But if.
No, because if the price, if it says 3% of purchase price, right? Your original contract is for $300,000. $9,000 is the amount you write in your contract, because you cannot write percentages in the contract.
Okay, she's talking about,
Do the math.
she's talking about contract, not agreement.
Contract is between the buyer and seller is where I'm at, okay? And then your buyer agency agreement between you and your buyer. That's how I'm gonna refer to them. Is that cleared up? Okay, so you have 3% of purchase price in your buyer agency because you don't know what price they're gonna land at, right?
Right.
So you have 3% of purchase price. So then you write an offer and your purchase price is $300,000, right? So 3% of the 300,000 is $9,000. So I write $9,000 in my offer for the seller to pay me. Seller accepts it, that's great. We get to appraisal and it doesn't appraise, so the seller reduces the price. Now that $9,000 is sitting there on a $290,000 house. Are you getting more than 3% now? Yes. And what's your buyer agency say?
Because I've asked specifically 9,000.
Correct. It's not a percentage in your contract between the buyer and seller. You have to do the math and you have to put a dollar amount in. So if the price reduces in your contract, then you need to make sure your buyer agency is still compliant with the number
Right.
that the seller's paying in your commission.
So in that case, if that did happen, I would not be in compliance with my buyer's agency contract.
Absolutely.
If that's
I have to go
Correct.
back and amend.
You would admit-
All of a sudden it went to 290.
Right.
Your 9,000 is now out of compliance.
Right.
So basically, would it just be simpler as if you do negotiate back and forth and you counter, just have your final counter, change the numbers?
Well,
And your counteroffer addendum has it on there.
go down though. From the buyer's original offer, they don't normally go down,
Right.
right? But they do at inspection or appraisal, that can happen and more often.
Us in there, we're gonna see a lot of things we're not used to.
They'll be going up, you know, like if, most of the time a seller, if they're coming back at you, they're like, no, I don't want you to pay that much. You know, why don't you pay a little less? No, the seller's coming at you and saying, I want more money. So most of the time at your offer stage, so you can't really get it in a counter offer. But if the price reduces, which can happen after inspections, after appraisal, that's when you would end up having to do an amendment somewhere, either to your buyer agency contract or to the amount of commission the seller is paying the buyer agent on page 4.
Can I just piggyback on something she said there? I want to plus it. They made it very clear today, and I hadn't thought about this, but yes, because we've all had this situation happen. When you say 3%, be very clear, 3% of what? 3% of purchase price, 3% of net sales price, 3%, I mean, 3% of what? So like Brenda may offer guidance saying it's purchase price, but how many times have you gotten to closing and say, am I paying commission on the closing fees? Like, I don't want to pay on the buyer's closing fees. So make sure that you know what 3% is of what. It's written in there.
Yeah, 3% of purchase price, I would.
That's the one I would put purchase price if it was me.
Does that kind of sink in yet, or do you want to kind of hit on it some more, anybody?
Yeah, I think I understand.
Okay,
I'm glad you brought that up because I hadn't thought about that aspect.
there's a lot of little things like that. I'll try to.
The first couple of weeks is just going to be one giant cluster.
Right.
So
So the good news is though, the amendments to the buyer agency contract and the listing agreements comes out Monday. And it says in those amendments that they go into effect on the 14th, starting Monday. Anything you don't have in a pending contract, you can go ahead and get that document.
Can I add it? And I don't know if they gave you this information, but this is the information I have. Starting at about 5 PM on the 13th, all buyers' compensations go away on the MLS. They will be taking them down all through the night. On the 14th, KCRAR, the rules, we have until federally or to NAR settlement till the 17th, but KCRAR is midnight on the 14th.
I feel like that needs to be the new date in everybody's head.
The
14th.
It is the date.
17th, but that's a Saturday and that's NAR.
And that's why they did the 14th.
Kansas City is the 14th.
We are the 14th. And if you have something that's pending on the 13th, you had better get a screenshot of your compensation.
Or MLS sheet, print it out.
Because after it disappears on the evening of the 13th, there is no going back on that. You have nothing in writing. Everybody clear on that?
If you're pending on the 13th, you're locked into that commission that was offered. If your contract is pending. print your MLSD, 'cause you should have it in your file anyway, so.
Should be in there anyway, yes.
Yeah.
But you should give it.
So can we assume DocuSign will be up and accurate at that point
That's great question.
with the new form? Or maybe not.
By the way, you all have access to the watermark forms now.
They will feed a document, informs when they're available, yeah.
The watermark is in like for training.
Yeah.
So you said the amendments come out on Monday, but the other, like the full agreements won't be out on Monday?
They'll come out on,
Only gives you this.
they're actually locked down until the 14th.
Yeah, so will they be available right when you go there the 14th? Probably not, because we have to have time to get them loaded.
That's why they're doing it on the 14th, so they can be ready to go by the weekends.
They outright said everybody's off on Saturday.
So do your amendments. And if you need to go do a listing on the 14th, I have a listing appointment that day. I need the new exclusive right to sell and it's not in command. Go to KCRAR and just get the document
Well,
if it's not loaded yet.
what you can do is your amendment for the listing agreement or the buyer's agreement doesn't take effect until the 14th anyway. So if you go on the evening of the 13th to sign a new listing, sign it up on the contracts you've always had, and then just do the amendment right there. And it will, if somehow you get a contract in the next 6 hours, fantastic. It's the only
Starting
rules.
Monday, you're using the old exclusive right to sell. Take that amendment with you and just have it signed at the same time saying this, and tell them this changes on the 14th. Here's the amendment. And it says it doesn't take effect till the 14th. We're gonna fill it out now. So just fill it out when you do your listing between the 5th and the 14th.
So I assume you're not posting commissions on, like you talked about last time, on a site.
No.
So for the people on Zoom, Marlene's question is we're not going to be posting are we not going to be posting the commissions? The more I've thought about it, the more Brenda has thought about it, the more we've talked, and the more I hear other really intelligent people, I don't see what's to be gained from
I
that.
agree.
There's a lot of liability to post it. One, you can't commingle with other offices. So if it's a third party provider and they want to put you on a website and then they throw a key partners commission on there with ours, with the Diamond Partners, you're in violation of the settlement, which means you could get sued. So that's not good. You have the commingling issue, plus what one person knows looking at that house. If you've told one agent an amount, you better make sure everybody that goes in there knows the same amount.
And it doesn't matter because you're gonna put another conflict in.
Yeah, right.
I think that's the thing that we're just, is everybody just breathe through this.
Yeah, I'm ready.
If you have realtors all across KCRAR kind of doing this the same way, where I'm not going to call Tricia 14 times, I'm going to, where is the crimp in this hourglass? Where's the crimp? The crimp is, and if you didn't have an intelligent conversation with the buyer when you sign the buyer agency agreement, then if they don't, like Brenda really, really wants this house. So we put in the offer that I'm going to get paid X, okay? But the seller is adamant they're not paying anybody anything. Brenda needs to know, if you don't have the cash to pay me, because we've already entered into that agreement, then
You know,
we're not getting that
there's
house.
A lot of quick signings, people wanting to see a house, right? And now you've got to get them signed up on a buyer agency. So what do? We throw it in for a digital signature. We send it over and someone goes click, click, done. And they didn't read a thing, right?
Stop it.
How important is it to say, now I need you to slow down on this page. You need to understand this is how much money I get paid.
Are you saying that we should actually explain a 7-page contract to somebody?
Right. If you're on the hood of the car doing it with ink because you're meeting them there, you need to say, no, I really need you to listen to what I'm saying here. We can ask the seller to pay this in your offer, but I want you to know that my fee is 3% or whatever percent you're charging that buyer. You need to make sure they understand, because what happens when you're writing an offer and they didn't pay attention or you didn't have a talk about commission? Now you're writing an offer saying, okay, let's ask the seller to pay the $9,000 you owe me. And they're like, I owe you $9,000, right? So you've got to have that conversation. You have to slow them down, and you can't just send a digital signature and let them click, click, click. We all know our clients have done it. You get it back too quick. They didn't read. You got to slow them down.
So let me just go a different direction. Then we've got a really great question online here. One, raise your hand if you understand procuring clause or procuring cause. Okay. So here's what I want you to do. Forget it. no longer matters. Has nothing to do with anything. If you don't have a written agreement, you don't have anything. So if Alice has gone out and she's the one that identified the property to the person, she sent it to him, she went out, she showed him the property, she went out, and then at the last second, Megan came in and sold the house. You used to have procuring cause to go say, that's my commission. And all we do now is like, who has the written agreement? Oh, Megan? Then we don't care. That's the way it's gonna be. Yeah, that's actually, and Wayne, I texted that to Wayne, and Wayne's like, this is gonna solve a lot of problems. I was like,
You're gonna see a lot fewer problems.
yeah.
And you know what could happen though, is make sure with these buyers, new buyers, have you signed anything with any other agent to look at a home? Because somebody's writing Kansas or Missouri or Johnson County in the general location, and they're thinking they're signing with that agent to see this one home. Right? They need to know what they've signed. They need to know the location. Hey, I'm signing you up, Megan, for all of Kansas today, right? Because I say, before you see this house, I have to have you sign this. I can't show you this house without you signing it. No, you can't show them any house, but now you're locked in with me on all of these houses, right? You've got to be clear because they could end up with multiple agreements if they think that they're signing for just one house. Because we just talked about how well they read these agreements.
If I'm a smart buyer and I've met Megan at an open house and I don't really know Megan yet, I'm not sure who she is or how good a job she's going to do. I might just sign a buyer agency agreement for these 4 addresses for one house, right? Right.
Right.
And that way I get to see her in action and whether I want to be in business with her or not.
For one day.
For one day.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So any house you sold that day so this is going to be fun. Hey, here's a fun question. Here's somebody that actually reads a lot. So Chris, thank you for this question. It's bound to happen. I'd rather not talk about it, but a lot of you are very, very sharp. It says, the FAQ says we can split out commission as a listing agent with the buyer's agent. We can, so here's the deal, guys. I'm going to explain this as best as I can. There's the National Association of Realtors Settlement, and nowhere in the National Association of Realtors Settlement does it say that you can't split commissions. Which the first thing in your head should be, then why are we having this conversation about all this kind of fun stuff? Apparently, not only the courts, the lawyers, and the DOJ are all telling people, that's all he would say, he says, I can't go into anything more, are telling people, we are going to be watching this with bated breath onto how this gets handled. And they are, so KCRAR is admittedly taking a overly conservative approach to go in where the puck is being passed to, not to where the puck is now. Does that make sense? Like they're saying that within a year, they can easily see like a lot of forms all over the country have already been out and they're already pulling them back. So while I was in the front of the line whining about how long this was taking KCRAR, what KCRAR is doing is talking to a lot of different attorneys and a lot of different people on this and getting input and saying, this is where it's going to be. So let's just do it now. Okay. So there's going to be some conversations between myself and Brenda on what additional clauses we may be able to add as this particular brokerage. And just know that we're looking out for it. And by the way, one of the antitrust attorneys in all of this has reviewed all of our forms and said that not only is KCRAR is not only looking at the spirit, but the language of the law, and he loves the forms. Which might mean that we're down the list. Ace, I'll come to you. Jesse?
So sorry to like houses, going back to that buyer's agent agreement. So like my record for one day is like 16 houses. So is it, if you just put the day, is that not specific enough probably?
If you put the day,
You still have a
every house you sold.
location for that day.
Sorry?
Your buyer agency agreement's gonna expire after that day. You're still gonna have a location in there.
So you, okay.
You'll still have a location in there. So at the end of that day, and if you need to send them a list of homes, if they buy or someone buys on their behalf that you get paid, you better have that list over to them by the end of the day.
That's what I was gonna say. So you just get the record off of broker pay or whatever.
Yeah.
You gotta prove it or what?
Well, you've got to send that list to the client, right?
Right,
If you buy these addresses,
right.
you pay me in the next, if you put how many days, right? You buy one of these houses in the next 180 days, you owe me.
But that wouldn't have to be the buyer's agency. You could do the exact just day.
the buyer agency agreement, it is in your buyer agency that you will send them a list
Okay.
when before it expires. Yeah, so at the end of the day, you're gonna go home and type up an email with the list of houses. Hey, and your buyer agency is going to say,
And I mean, I sent it
however
to them
many days.
anyway, in order, so they have it anyway, so.
but no, you have to send a list that says, if you buy one of these or someone buys one on your behalf for your benefit, I get paid.
Lawyers and judges love paper trails.
Right.
The first time I ever testified in a Washington DC court, the judge ruled in favor of the person I was testifying for, because when he asked questions, I pulled out a notebook and I said, well, at 543. And the judge referenced that right there is all the evidence he needs.
And it says that paragraph in your buyer agency that I've seen people write the same number in both blanks. And it doesn't really make sense, but you have so many days to send them the list. And if they buy the house within so many days, right?
Right.
So make sure you understand what that paragraph says too when you're filling it out.
Let me also go, he says, the FAQ says we can post offers of compensation on Zillow or other IDX fees. I do not believe that is accurate anymore, or,
Not if you're marking for your listing to go out to all websites.
yeah.
If you're feeding out from MLS, anywhere it feeds to, you're not gonna be putting it on there.
Yeah.
But we're not wanting to put out our commissions anyway, guys. It's risky, it creates liability, and there's a lot more terms that could be in that offer. If you say you're not paying commission, the seller is not paying commission, right? So a buyer chooses not to see that house because the seller's not, that seller has no idea how much that buyer would have offered, right? Maybe the buyer was gonna have a higher price than the guy that didn't need the commission, right? So could they be leaving money on the table? You are better off to say, write your offer how your buyer would like it, and I'll present it to my seller. Don't give out an amount because you don't know what their purchase price is. You don't know all the other terms of that contract, right?
And speaking of Zillow, if you're thinking about using those Zillow touring forms as some sort of workaround, because agents are creative, A, they're not allowed in Kansas or Missouri, so no, okay? And B, Zillow is not working in your best interest. Who's Zillow working for? The people that pay them for stuff. All you're doing on those touring forms is creating a database for them to sell those names to other people. Stop.
And you know what they were calling the limited service transaction broker agreement at KCRAR?
A lawsuit waiting to happen.
The serial killer form.
Jessica said that, yeah.
Yeah.
So, Asa?
I had a second, but let me go back to my first question. So are you saying that the NAR verbiage, actually the lawsuit verbiage is actually different than what KCRAR is implementing, and what KCRAR is almost like how the whole dual agency, how it's allowed in Missouri, but just Diamond Partners, we don't do it.
Correct.
So the perfect way to put this is, and you said something that struck my memory. All of the proper language is in our forms. The NAR settlement required language is in our forms. So don't be coming up with your own forms is the first thing. The second thing is KCRAR is talking to the Department of, this is what I'm getting. They're talking to the Department of Justice. They're talking to the antitrust lawyers, and they're like reading the tea leaves and saying, listen, are we just going to have to redo all this again in January or February, or should we just do it now?
And when you say it's different from NAR, it's tighter.
Yeah.
It reduces our liability and our risk. So it's better.
We actually have agents that work out of this office that are in different MLSs, and their forms have the buyer share or the compensation sharing in there. It's going to tell you, so you're not surprised in other areas. And a lot of places that have put those out are now pulling those back. And so sooner or later, hang on, I always know you have a question. So yeah, but we're gonna have a lot of fun here with these, because we're just not gonna allow that at this point, right? Is what I'm understanding. Commission.
Right. Yeah, we're not putting that in there.
Yes, please.
What you actually alluded to my question is, because I'm in Kansas City and Lawrence, and I know you've been to all the Lawrence things, and theirs just come out. I haven't had a chance to look at their documents yet. Is your recommendation to only use the Kansas City contracts and not any others?
Kansas City contracts have always been better than the other boards that are around us.
That's a good question, but then you got to work with the co-oping
And
agent on
so
it.
on your agency agreements, that doesn't even come into the other agent. right? The contract could
But
come in on
contracts
Lawrence
could come in-
forms.
Yeah,
Yes, it is.
so should we require, if I've got a Lawrence listing, should I require
You
the?
can't.
Okay,
You
that's why I'm like, is that a thing?
Yeah, it's a
So-
thing, but you can't require, if you're in a board market,
Right, you have to, right.
you can't tell them they have to use a different
Yes.
board form from that board market, but, yeah, but make sure you feel protected in it, the way it comes in, but the contract, I don't think it's gonna come in and make you be worried about it, you know, like,
Okay,
I mean, KCRAR lets them ask for buyer agent compensation, right? So, I mean, we're really different.
You can suggest, you can, especially if you're the buyer's agent, you can really kind of suggest because it works to the seller's advantage.
And my second question was going back to the whole writing, whatever your it's not the word, it's compensation. Whatever just write it up. So if I'm working with a buyer and I've let them know all of this information, like what if my buyer doesn't want to see homes where the seller is not offering compensation? I won't know if this agent is not telling me.
What if your buyer doesn't want to see homes where the seller's not paying closing costs? You still, right? Same thing?
Right.
And same thing, we ask for it and we make our offer good. And we all know a seller negotiates more with paper in front of them, right?
Have you
Put it
ever
in your
had that
price,
as a-
get a counter back. What's this gonna take to make this happen the way I need it to happen, right? If you come together, great. The seller needs to look at all terms in that contract or in that offer.
There's a lot of as-is agreements out there that are just basically agreements, but they're not actually binding unless you click, like, you already have so many unknowns anyway. We're just adding an unknown. By the way, this is another value for you to sell at the appointment.
I just did a listing appointment and it went really smoothly doing a seller's estimate for them, just to, instead of that commission being one lump sum, putting it as a separate line item and saying, expect this to come, we'll negotiate it when it gets here, but expect this to come off the top, off the bottom line, and if it doesn't, great.
What was their reaction?
Okay,
Did you put it under potential expenses?
I put it, well, on our form, there's two lines for commission, one right on top of the other, so I put mine in on the standard line and then right below, and there's a blank there that lets you specify, I put buyer's agent commission and put it right there, and they're like, okay, great.
And on the new form, it'll have potential.
I did-
Yeah, on
It's
the
changed.
estimated buyer selling, it actually has.
Seller has proceeded.
Seller, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm having a tough time with the English language today. But the line 17, there's a broker fee, and then there's a couple more down below. They realize that's a flaw. They're gonna have some fun. I got up way early this morning. And then the other thing about that though is I love the way Jessica did it. She said on hers, she'll just say, by the way, I'm more expensive than most agents, and this is what I charge for a buyer, fee. And she writes that in there. She goes, it'll probably be that or less. Is what she says.
Probably,
I love that.
probably.
Right. Probably.
Yeah.
I don't know if she said probably, but I think.
Yeah, but do say it because that's a good word to have in there. Don't say it will be.
It's gonna be, most buyer agents are not gonna have the skill involved to ask for more than
3%.
3%, because frankly, there's a lot of people that aren't sure of their value.
So someone asked me
Good.
that I had a conversation with this week. They asked me, well, can I force them to show me the buyer agency? I don't trust that. I don't care if their forms are right. I care if your forms are right.
We don't have enforcement ability.
Yeah,
But here's what's fun. KCRAR does. And they've made it very clear, we don't want to be in this business. But by the settlement, they have no other recourse. So just like, so they have the right, John,
Yes.
to pull your contract, want to see when you signed your buyer's agency, and then go to Broker Bay and see when your showing started. If your showing started on the 10th and your agency was signed on the 17th, you're gonna have to do some fancy talking.
and we all know backdating's illegal, right?
Sign it when you have the conversation.
It only protects you anyway.
Can you schedule it and have, like, if they call me and say, hey, I wanna see this tomorrow, did you sign it? Can I schedule it today and have it all signed tomorrow and I'm still in compliance?
Just can't show it.
Okay.
If they don't want to sign it, My daddy told me not to sign anything. Well, we could cancel the showing, or we could just go ahead and sign this up for me to show you this property.
We should just do it like gym memberships, put everything in 6 fonts. Credit card.
Not go in the house without permission to go show them that house.
I think it's gonna be easy.
I do too. It got a lot more simple this week.
Sorry?
And you know, basically it's the seller agreeing to pay buyer agent commission at a different point in the process.
You know, one of the instructors, Alex, asked a great question. He said, when you're fighting this, here's what I want you to consider. Are you fighting this because it's in the best fiduciary interest of your seller? Or are you fighting this because this has changed for you? And I was like, that is a great question. Just,
One other kind of thing I want to point out that's pretty easy just to understand, that commission is not a concession at Heartland MLS. So when you record your sold data and you put in the amount of concessions, you know how you enter in your the amount of seller paid closing costs? You are not entering in buyer agent commission in that blank. So appraisers might be calling you saying, did the seller pay buyer agent compensation? And KCRAR recommends that we cooperate with these appraisers and give them the amount.
But otherwise, it'll never be in the KCRAR.
No, and even the old ones that showed how much buyer agent commission was paid are disappearing. All of it's disappearing. Even solds
So it's going back forever or just
Yes.
recently?
forever. There will not be any mention of buyer agent compensation in MLS at all. You can't find it anywhere, except for don't do it maybe in a rule.
Get rid of it.
yeah, it'll be like the firm, just an army of staff in them shredding. Just one of the other things, because these things fascinate me. Apparently, all of the settlement attorneys that brought the suits have audit rights. Like they can come to any office and they can ask to see all of your documents and everything. So they believe that what they're going to do is lay low for about a year or two, make it worth their economic while.
Somebody to do that.
Yeah, and then go in and audit places and, hey, we want 5,000 for this and 10,000 for that and 15,000 for that. And if you're making the same mistake contract after contract, that could add up, you know, if you do a sizable business. So maybe it would be good to keep coming to these classes. I don't think these classes are ending anytime soon, right? I mean, until everybody says, like when 3 people are showing up, we'll know that everybody's got it.
You know, they even said at KCRAR in the listing agreement, don't even mark that the seller is willing to pay it. Don't mark that box.
Yeah.
I said, why would you even mark it? Because it's all an offer. The seller can't dictate what a buyer puts in their offer, right?
Right, and that's what they said. When you're getting to the paragraph 10, line B, make sure that if they don't want to offer anything, or if they do want to, make sure that they know you're having this conversation at that time. Hey, Megan, so thank you. We're gonna do it that way, but I have no control over what a buyer will or won't ask for.
Right. I'm not offering it. Doesn't mean a buyer can't ask for it. 2 very different things.
Yep.
So we're not going to offer it. I'm not going to throw out there, this is our price and we want to give you $9,000.
Yeah.
I'm not going to offer that, but a buyer can ask for it.
So we can just leave it blank. We don't have to fill it.
You don't want to check that box. You want to check the box below it, whatever that one said.
It just says check if applicable.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't have to check.
Why does that hurt? Because buyers aren't gonna see our listing agreement.
It's a choice. If a seller wants to advertise that they're going to pay $9,000 and the agent thinks that's a good idea, and they've had that conversation, this is all about choices, guys. So if it's a choice, if they want to advertise that, then they can advertise it anywhere that's not connected to the MLS.
All right, so Denise, here I am your seller. Why didn't you tell these people coming in that I would pay? I said that you could offer it. Why didn't you tell these people that I would pay buyer agent commission? It says in their feedback here, my buyer needs to know if your seller will pay commission. I thought I marketed to offer that. We're not offering to give your money away before they even offer. And that would be kind of like if someone called you and a buyer's agent calls you on your listing $500,000, and you say, we'll take $475.
I get that, but I guess my thought is if they check that box, I feel like in my mind, I've kind of thought through it, like my answer would be. Bring us the offer, if the offer's right, they will consider it. But they
That's,
still can, they just don't.
write it up and bring it to me, I'll present it to my seller. That's all you
Right.
gotta say. You don't have to say yes, you don't have to say no. Let's present it, all the terms come into play, right? There's a lot of important
Right.
stuff in an offer.
But that's what I'm saying, like, if they check that box, it doesn't mean I have to give away a percentage or anything, it just means.
That means you say yes, so they already know, they're, okay, your bottom line just went down. I'm not asking for any and you already told me yes, so I'm taking a little off at least, right?
The biggest reason not to mark that is it means nothing. It means nothing.
There's no
So it's
teeth in
just
it at all.
distracting.
All of the boxes there mean nothing, so
No,
it's
no, that's not true. Oh, you mean in number 10?
yeah, like 10B,
Right,
whether
so
they
why
do or
would you
don't.
mark it? Because it means,
Whether they
it
do or
means
don't.
nothing. They can change their mind 15 times, so it means nothing.
Yeah, if they
right?
never agree to an
More
amount.
paperwork if you.
If the offer comes, you've said yes, they'll pay it, offer comes in low, you're like, okay, well, now they're not gonna pay it if that's the price you want,
Right, so I can
right?
advertise.
You don't know until you see all the terms of that offer.
If they click they don't want to offer, but they end up doing it in the final contract, it's KCRAR's opinion that you don't need to go back and do an amendment on that. Just leave.
We didn't offer it, they asked for it and we agreed. Offer,
But if
see
you
the
check,
difference? Offer it.
they check the box that the seller is not willing to compensate the broker assisting buyer, I can't even tell a buyer. Bring us an offer
Write it up.
and they'll consider it, because I can't say that they'll consider it because I checked the box.
My seller will make no repairs. How many times have we seen it? Seller will make no repairs. Have you asked for repairs when they said it? Sure you have. You know, it's all of it is different. A seller cannot dictate what a buyer puts in their offer. So you can't dictate what the buyer's agent will write up in that offer either with their buyer. So even though you and your seller are saying no, I might still bring it to you. Just because you told me no, I don't care. And you know what? I'm not even gonna ask you. I'm just gonna write up what I want.
So Brenda and I were also talking about this, the exclusive right to sell. And there's an additional promise thing at the end, right? Additional terms or something
Sure,
like that.
conditional terms and conditions.
We're considering, I'm strongly like lobbying for this, that we have a clause that's office approved that says, in the case of an unrepresented buyer, my fee has an additional percentage of X. This is the time to have the conversation, not when if you don't have this conversation now and an unrepresented buyer comes and refuses to pay you anything, your fiduciary is still to the seller.
They'll show
You
it.
still have to go work with that unrepresented buyer. Now, you don't have to do all the ministerial acts if they sign that, you know, what was it called, non-representative or the transaction brokerage.
Yeah, if they use the serial killer forms.
Yeah, the serial killer form. So, but you don't have to, like, you can just tell them, well, you figure out how to do inspections, right? But then you
They
still
can't open the door.
in the house.
Yeah, it benefit your seller for you to be there. The thing you want to write and be specific because a REIS agent could use the serial killer form and that buyer is technically not represented if they're a transaction broker, right? And they come to your listing. So be specific. In the event the designated listing agent assists an unrepresented buyer, the fee becomes. Right? And when you write your offer, when you write the offer for that buyer that's not represented, you still need to write in that amount that you want.
If you've already listed agent, you can show an unrepresented buyer that listing. That's what you just asked for.
I wanna
Now,
know,
buyer agency agreement, you can show your own listing.
Yes.
sure I can, because I'm gonna have this clause in here, in the event. that
Well, not
there's-
just because of that clause. But you can show your
Well,
listing
sure I
because you
can, but I
represent
wanna
the
get
seller.
paid for it.
An open house is not a tour.
I wanna make sure I get paid for it. So I need to put in the event a designated seller, designated
Designated seller's
seller's
aid
agent
assists.
assists the unrepresented buyer, my fee goes up, whatever.
Yeah. Goes up to whatever. And that the sellers agreed to pay it there, right? So
Okay.
actually you wouldn't write that in for buyer agent commission.
I wasn't listening. I was thinking.
You're correct.
Yes, so you would not write that in there.
Correct.
Because there is not a form to establish commission for you from that buyer.
I understand.
So you're getting it from your seller.
So you
If
would
it's
leave
you
the
doing it.
buyer agent commission line of the contract as 0.
Right, because you're already getting it. If you write it both places, the seller's paying double.
So can I just like interrupt for a second, offer a conversation that you could possibly have? Like, so here's a conversation that could possibly be had with a buyer who's trying to understand all of this, okay? So I was thinking about this last night. Our average sales price is $319,000, and hypothetically, let's say 3%. So that's a $9,570 earned commission. Does everybody follow that so far? That kind of ring true? But because $9,570 is a hard number for me, I'm just gonna say $10,000. Okay. At today's interest rates, every $1,000 you borrow costs you $6. Everybody follow that? Every $1,000 you borrow costs you $6 on your house payment. That'll go up or down depending on what interest rates are. But so 6 times 10 1,000s to get to 10,000 times 12 months is $720 a year. $720 a year times the 10 years that people are staying in their houses means that they're actually paying $7,200 towards your commissions through the house payment. Or if you would like, you could just write me a check for $10,000. Do you see the cost of money right there?
The additional.
The additional, yeah, so I'm not saying that this is a tool to use every buyer's agency appointment. What I am saying is, if you understand the cost of the money and you can explain it to somebody about where it is and where it's going. And by the way, is it safe to say that if you own a house at 10 and the average appreciation over any 20-year period in Kansas City is 4.1, that 4.1 times 10 years times whatever the amount of that house is gonna be greater than $10,000?
Well, Chris, they could put extra $10,000 down and get rid of PMI or whatever.
Yes,
You know, you just
exactly.
gotta weigh out all the different
So
options.
these are the things this is how you sell, listen, yes, I know it costs money, but not owning a house is costing you.
Right.
I just wanted to.
Yep.
Mary, have a question on Zoom?
Yeah, we had a question and comment. Gary says, remember, if you want to try and fight, the DOJ has 97% victory rate in court. The odds are not in your favor.
Don't try to find a way around anything.
Yeah. Yep. Also, I have a listing in pre-MLS that goes live 8/16. I'm not the best timing, I know. Should I amend this listing now or wait until 8/14?
Amend it sometime between the 5th and the 14th. Because it is a listing. It is an effective listing agreement. So amend it when the forms come out on the 5th, between then and the 14th. Just make sure it's done by the 14th.
Lastly, with the attorneys waiting until 12 to 24 months, waiting for us to make mistakes.
Hypothetically.
Will there be warnings, review, or other notifications before they come after you?
No. You'll
property-
get the scary letter or the blue suit or whoever you get.
How many of you have ever sold a house that was built before 1978? I know sometimes you guys think our compliance office is just a real royal pain in the tuchus, okay?
They do a great job.
So, but that applies to property management as well, by the way. HUD walked into a property manager's office about 12 months ago, or maybe 10 months ago at this point, I don't know, I'm not sure. And said, stop everything else you're doing, show us every file of every home you have built before 1978. And they racked up $340,000 in $10,000 fines for not having the right forms. Okay, so now so that's just an example of when you want to play with the federal government, you do so at your own peril. Just do the forms. When somebody from our office sends back a form and says you need to do this, you might be right. Maybe it's true that you don't need to do that, but rather, can we all give each other some grace for a little while, trying to make sure that we're finding the groove of what is necessary and what's not necessary so that we can all be on the same page? And
So
I think that grace goes to your fellow agents, by the way.
If you guys don't do what you're supposed to do, who also gets in trouble for that? That's right. So we'll be checking your stuff before the 14th. And if I have to do paperwork for you, you'll pay me. I gotta hit you where it hurts, right? Yeah, it won't be cheap.
There was something that said, and I just want to make sure there wasn't confusion. So yes, we have to get a document signed to show a house.
Unless it's an open house, they're not considering open houses tours at this point.
But if it's
Right.
your listing, somebody calls for an appointment, you know, I'm representing seller already, do I have?
This is why we want to address the unrepresented buyers in the listing appointment, because fiduciary.
I'm not worried about seller. Do I have
Yeah.
to sign anything with?
No,
the buyer to
No,
show-
no.
because you're working for the seller.
Okay.
No,
that's-
There's
but
nothing.
you should, so that you can get paid.
No.
No, because you can't. There's nothing to sign with that buyer,
I'll tell you what I just
right?
wrote.
On your listing?
Right, so.
There's no way to establish pay from the buyer on your listing unless you do it with your seller at your listing appointment on your listing agreement.
But if they don't want that house, they want to go look at another house.
Now,
And that's a
Now you got.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you can sign them up.
I'm gonna tell Wayne if he calls me
You
and
can
says,
have that conversation with them before you go show that house. It was
Yes.
like
Hey, we-
encouraging buyer
there-
consultations before you showed them your own listing.
But
Yeah, or you
If you have a
could,
good-
are you working for your seller? If you say, there's 2 others on the street for sale. Let's go see all 3 of these. How would your seller feel? Unless you just feel like you're that much better.
somebody said something in the thing, and said, this is gonna be the resurgence of people understanding agency.
Right.
And so if Wayne comes to me and says, I refuse to have a buyer's agent, I'm as smart as any agent I've ever known, and I want you to show me this listing you've got, I'm gonna look at Wayne and I'm gonna say, okay, because A, I've already had the conversation with the seller, so in my additional clauses, I've already got compensation worked out. But B, I'm gonna look at Wayne and say, you know what? You are completely unrepresented. I hope you tell me anything I can use against you. I can say that to him.
Right, and you hand him the brochure, right, so he knows his options.
I'm not telling you about your 10-day inspection period. I'm not telling you about any of that stuff. Here's the contract, read it.
And if you're uncomfortable with that, there are plenty of us that will do referral. Well, I'm serious, I've done that before.
I get it,
Because
yes.
you know, if I've got 2 friends, I don't want somebody upset with me. So there are plenty of ways to make money.
So Rebecca had a question. I'm assuming that's Becky. It says, so are you saying in buyer's agency do percentage, but in real estate contracts do the dollar amount? And so I think it goes back to ACEs that we kind of, and so she may have already had her answer. But again, to Brenda's point, if you're asking 3% and it's $9,000 on the offer, but for whatever reason, and by the way, there used to be a day when houses sold for less than they were being asked, right? You know, so then you would keep adjusting that number because you do have to write in a fixed number on the real estate contract, not a percentage.
All right, guys, what's going through your head? Everybody's quiet, let's hear
I think
it.
the biggest problem is gonna be not necessarily clients, but the other agents.
I think it's gonna be all of us. We're used to doing something. I mean, I've
Lead
been
by example.
for 23 and a half years, and now you're telling me I have to change? My default is gonna be what?
Guys, I picked up the phone and called some of our agents who don't come to anything. I've talked to them. I've been having conversations on the phone because they haven't shown up. I'm not gonna do that to everybody. I can't. But if it crosses my mind, I'm calling people because we're not going down like that. I want everybody to know what they're doing. And if you don't know, call and ask me. If there's going to be a ton of questions, so don't hesitate.
Yeah, and by the way, your question probably helps 7 other people around you. John?
The unrepresented buyer fee added on to the seller's contract sure sounds like a conflict there in dual agency.
It is not. In the event, the designated listing agent, designated seller's agent, assist an unrepresented buyer, the fee is this, because I'm doing work. I'm assisting that buyer and I'm doing work. We do it now, right? And we've said they're unrepresented. They'd have to be represented to be dual agency.
Make sure they give them.
That's a great point of
Yeah.
clarification. Thank you for asking that. Asa?
Is there a possibility that any of these, not the actual lawsuit itself, but just some boxes or how okay. So the whole percentage thing, we have to put in a dollar amount on the contract when we're representing a buyer. Could that possibly change in the future to being a percentage?
You have to take the future.
Hey, I would, new contracts come out in January, right?
Let me get my.
So these are gonna be these are gonna be enforced from August 12th.
Oh, no.
I'll bet, I'll write $1,000 check right now to anybody that wants to put it up against me that there will be changes in January.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't know that that'll be one of them. They haven't said they are considering it or anything like that. Right now, it's a flat fee. Don't put a percent.
Not that I would want a percentage in there either, because then I just think it just leaves too much gray.
Percentage of what?
at the end to, yes, I wanna know, it's clear as day, this is what.
That's less question and conflict at the end, yeah.
What'll be funny is when it's $9,314.76. Or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, so like, to sum it up in the most simplest form, if you are representing a buyer and that buyer wants the seller to pay your buyer agent commission, ask for it in your offer. Don't go chasing down the listing agent. Don't go trying to find how much that seller said they would pay. Just write it up. Don't even call and ask. Just write up what they want.
But if they want to call, they can. I mean, are we gonna say they can't?
I'm not saying you can't. I'm saying don't waste your time.
If
I'm offering what my buyer wants to
the
offer.
reason I ask that, if I look at something in this market that's been on the market for 12 days and still isn't under contract or whatever, I'm probably gonna just pray that that's a weak agent, call them and say, hey, tell me what your seller's doing for the buyer, if anything. Because some people talk too much.
Now, somebody might be advertising it out there at a higher rate, right? A higher rate than what you were gonna charge your buyer. Have a conversation with your buyer, because you have a buyer agency.
So on the,
Make it higher, you can allocate it somewhere else.
on the buyer agency, so that, if they say, okay, I'll give you 3%, I've only put 2.5, let's say on my buyer agency. So I can do that change form, correct?
You can amend your buyer agency agreement. You've
So
got to
I
look
can-
at it from the client perspective too. I don't want you to get, I mean, when you get in that situation, that's a weird conversation. I know I said I was only going to charge you this, but now I'm going to charge you more because the seller will pay it. If it's me, I'm working for what I said I worked for. And I'm going to say, I want to go ahead and try to use this extra money for your benefit because I already agreed to what I would work for. But the seller's offering more. They put it on the table and played all their cards. So let's ask for a warranty. Let's ask for them to pay however much of your closing costs on top of asking them to pay what I agreed I would work for.
But if it's more or less, then you use that change form.
This is hard, guys, because most of you for your entire careers have seen that little thing in there that says, I'm asking a minimum of 3% or higher. And if there's a clause in there
Never higher,
that
yeah.
probably should have been in there, it's that clause.
Yeah, because it was that 3% or what's shown in MLS, whichever is higher, is basically how it reads in the forms today.
I've signed a lot of them that said 3% and got paid 3.5%. But just, you can't buy a Model T anymore. You just can't. Well, you can, but I mean, just, it's gone, it's over. Enjoy it for the next week or two. But it's over. Can we give, I want to have some preemptive applause for our team, including Jackie, who's not here, productivity coach, and for Brenda, and for everybody that's going to have to answer all of your questions at 6:43 in the morning on the 14th. So can we give a round of applause? We're here to serve you, but please read these things over. Ask your questions before the 14th, because that's probably a better time than when you're sitting there at the table with somebody.
Yeah, it's ask the questions. If you've got them, let's have them.
Not only do you deserve applause, I think the compliance does too. I meant when I said I think they do a great job. I don't always do everything perfectly. They remind me, and I try to do it right. So it's good.
Yeah, and I'm in good communication with our compliance folks. Good, she'll ask me questions. She can't change what I told her. So if you don't agree with what she's told you, you probably ought to just save the email and send it to me and not send it to her, because she can't change what I've told her she had to do. And even if she misunderstood me, she can't change because you tell her she's wrong. She's gonna have to get it from me. So if you want to argue with someone about the compliance, what she said, just email me instead. And then if it's something that she's misunderstood, I'll let her know, and she knows then. I mean, she's real easy for me to get a hold of.
And again, grace, because Is it possible that there are some real estate agents in this office and around Kansas City that only sell 2 or 3 houses a year? And at some point in the next few months, they're gonna realize that their dues are due, so they go ahead and sell one house. And they don't even know that there was a lawsuit.
Guys, we could, like how many jelly beans are in a jar? How many days is it gonna take for somebody to call me and say, where do I enter my buyer agent commission on MLS? Gonna happen, I know.
You just have an under on that.
Yeah,
That's funny. It's not, but.
I know.
We're releasing you to the wild.
Yep, that's it.